Tori, Chapter 5. I jogged down the spiraling staircase and air tower, my heart pounding with exhilaration. We were staying. Leaving had seemed like the only option for a few bleak hours, but at the moment, Darcy had said she wanted to stay. A weight had lifted from my chest. I'd never run from any challenge in my life, and deep in my soul, I'd known that I would have never forgiven myself if I'd ended up running from this. I might not have wanted the throne or to rule over other Fae in this academy, but I sure as hell didn't want to bow to the demands of a bunch of sadistic assholes either. A couple of students noticed me as I passed. A few shouts coming my way like, "Fancy a swim, Tori?" And "Did you enjoy your dip last night?" I responded by holding my head high and moving beyond them without even bothering to reply. I had bigger fish to fry. Well, especially than a few hanger-on douchebags who were only concerned with impressing the heirs. I'd made it out of Air Tower just in time to see a lightning flash within the dark sea of clouds overhead. Thunder boomed, and I glanced up at the tempest sky, expecting rain at any moment. I jogged down the path that led to the orb, my high ponytail swinging across my back from the fast pace. The wind blew a little fiercer, and my hair whipped around me, the smell of smoke assaulting my nostrils. I gritted my teeth, hoping no one else had noticed that scent on my clothes when I'd passed them. I kept my pace up as I passed the orb and turned toward Ignis' house, merging with the other fire elemental students who were among the last to head back from the assembly. I wound my way between them, wanting to get back quickly, and hurried forward as I spotted Sophia. "Hey," I said as I fell into step with her. "Tori!" She threw her arms around me, and I stumbled back in surprise as I returned her embrace for a moment. "I was worried about the two of you," she said. "I've seen the footage of what the heirs—" "I'm fine," I said quickly, wriggling out of her grasp as I spotted Darius prowling our way. The last thing I needed was for him to think I was moping about what he'd done to me. He was laughing with a bunch of his fan club, and I resisted the urge to gag at their display. Milton Hubert was smiling at him so widely I got the feeling that he'd lick the boots if that's what Darius wanted. Sophia followed my gaze as she released me, and I gave her a nudge to get her moving towards the house again, turning my back on Darius as his gaze moved my way. I wanted to get back before him. We walked on in silence. I encouraged Sophia to move even faster, while the crowd began to thicken. The wind blustered around us, carrying the scent of smoke on the air just as the giant crash broke through the sky and the rain burst free of the clouds. Several students cried out as the torrent downpour crashed over us and we started running towards the safety of the house. A lot of the older students created shields of hot air above their head to evaporate the rain before it could reach them, but I didn't even consider attempting it. I let the rain drench me, releasing a laugh at my luck. Now I didn't have to worry about anyone noticing the stench of smoke on my skin anymore. Sophia looked at me like I was crazy, and I grinned at her. "I like rain," I said, by way of an explanation, and she shook her head, clearly not agreeing. As we made it to the doors of Ignis' house, cries of alarm went up. People were screaming and calling for help, and my heart quickened at the sound of it. Inside, I took to the steps two at a time, wanting a front row seat when Darius made it upstairs and found out what had happened to his precious room. Sophia barely managed to keep up with me, and I almost lost her more than once in the crowd of shouting, panicking students. "Someone get Darius!" Marguerite screamed. "We need his water magic!" I slipped into the common room and I pressed my back against the wall where I could get a clear view of what was happening. The stench of smoke had filled the space, and more than a few students were coughing and hurrying back outside. "What the hell is going on?" Darius bellowed as he made it into the common room, and a lot of panicking voices fell quiet at his commanding tone. "Upstairs!" Marguerite called desperately, running to grasp his hand. "It's your room! It's on fire!" "What?" Darius snatched his hand out of her grip and sprinted through the common room. The other students scattered to get out of his way as he charged up the stairs. I caught Sophia's elbow and we made it into the crowd to follow him. She looked up at me with wide eyes and I shrugged like I was just as curious as her. I felt a bit shitty about not telling her the truth, but sharing what I'd done with her would only put her in danger. It was better for her if she remained totally innocent. Milton Hubert elbowed me out of the way as we reached the top floor, and I flattened myself against the wall to watch the commotion that broke out. Darius's doors had flames licking out from the top of it, and a thick layer of smoke clung to the ceiling all along the corridor. But it didn't look like the fire had progressed beyond his room. I wondered if that was to do with my magic and the fact that I'd only wanted to target him, or if it was just luck that it hadn't spread any further. With a snarl of rage, Darius kicked his door hard enough to smash the lock and break it open. The fire tried to explode towards him, hungry for the fresh oxygen supply. But Darius already had his hands raised, and he wrangled the flames under his control, forcing them back. Students were crying out, the crowd thickening in the corridor while people gave Darius the space to deal with the situation. I had to crane my neck to see over the other students' heads, and I caught a glimpse of Darius commanding a great flood of water into existence before him as he stepped into the inferno. "Who else holds the element of water?" Marguerite shrieked in panic as Darius moved out of sight. "He needs help." Everyone looked around. Someone said, "I've got Earth," unhelpfully. And then someone else noticed me. "Help him!" the girl demanded, grabbing my arm and hauling me forward. As the rest of the students noticed me, they shoved me through their ranks, crying out in encouraging words and demanding I help the Ignis house captain with his little problem. I made it to the front of the crowd and came face to face with Marguerite. Her bright red hair a mess for once, and tears painted with mascara running down her cheeks. "What are you waiting for?" she demanded, reaching out to grab my wrist. "Help him!" I snatched my arm back out of her grasp. "No," I said simply, my voice firm and offering no room for negotiation. "What?" she yelled. "You have to. I don't have to," I said. "And after last night, I've had more than enough water to last me a lifetime. I don't feel like conjuring any more of it." The sound of something heavy breaking was followed by a startled shout from Darius, and a lot of the students behind us screamed in fear. "Help him, you bitch!" Marguerite lunged at me like she was thinking of forcing me down the corridor, and I raised my hand, shoving her back with a smack of ice-cold water, which slammed into her against the opposite wall. "Oh, looks like I can manage a bit of water after all. That's enough, though. I don't feel like summoning any more." I smirked at her, and a few gasps of surprise came from the crowd. Marguerite spluttered angrily, raising her hands to defend herself, then seeming to think better of conjuring more fire in our current situation. "Your house captain needs your help," she snarled. Well, when I needed his help, he told me I'd have to force it from him, so I think I'll be giving the same answer, I replied icily. Marguerite shrieked, shoving herself up the wall opposite me, like she intended to attack me with her bare hands. Air magic built in my palms before I had a chance to use it. A commanding voice fell over the corridor. "Move aside!" Professor Pyro's voice carried from all the others, and the crowd parted to let her and Principal Nova through. They headed straight for the end of the corridor where Darius was still battling the blaze in his room. I offered Marguerite an innocent shrug as I joined the crowd who followed them. The professors headed straight inside, and I caught a glimpse of the devastation within as I held against the wall to watch. Darius was in the center of a blackened space, panting heavily, while he looked around at the remains of his bedroom. He managed to douse the flames, but now everything was soaking wet, as well as burnt to a crisp. His jeans were singed, his shirt burned almost entirely off his body to reveal the tattoos which marked his flesh, and soot lined his face. I noticed a dark red symbol raised on his forearm, which I recognized as a sign for Libra, and wondered for a moment why he had someone else's star sign on his skin. He looked angry as hell, and maybe even a little devastated, and I couldn't deny the surge of triumph that ran through my veins. Darius looked around as the professor and Nova strode into the room, his dark hair falling forward over his eyes, which were blazing with fury. "What on earth happened here, Mr. Acrux?" Principal Nova demanded sharply, her hands on her hips. "I don't know," he snarled. That's the first incident with poor Professor Astrom last night, and now this? What are the chances of two such major events being linked to fire magic within such a short space of time? Professor Pyro muttered worriedly. Perhaps we should be concerned that this was an attempt at a second attack? Who would try to attack a dragon shifter with fire? Nova replied dismissively. I'd sooner believe that this was an attempt to cover up evidence. Her voice trailed off, but her eyes narrowed on Darius. I hope you're not making an accusation against me, Principal. Darius growled, his voice low and menacing. Everyone in the corridor had fallen silent in hopes of listening in. A tense moment passed between Darius and the principal. I'm sure the FIB will get to the bottom of this, she replied eventually. Whatever the motivations for the blaze. Darius clearly took that as an insult, that he might have done this, and his eyes flashed with the characteristics of his dragon form as his anger grew. We will arrange another room for you while this mess is sorted out, Professor Pyro began, breaking down the growing tension in the room. It's fine, I have somewhere to sleep, Darius snapped. Okay, well, perhaps you can gather anything you can salvage here, and she trailed off as she looked around at the complete and utter devastation in the room. It certainly didn't look like anything could be salvaged. Poor little rich boy and his pretty things are gone. I had to fight the urge to smile which was coming from my lips, but I wasn't sure I was managing it. I just need my gold, and Darius looked around at the spot where his chest of gold used to be and kicked it aside. Some charred lumps of wood revealed a puddle of molten treasure, which had now cooled enough to fuse itself to the remains of the carpet and the floorboards. His whole body seemed to tremble with rage for a moment as the two professors took a measured step away from him. Control your form, Mr. Acrux, Nova demanded in a shrill voice. Oh shit, he's losing control of the dragon, a guy breathed behind me. Darius rocketed forward, bracing his hands on the floor as a growl of absolute fury escaped him, which sounded way too deep for any mere man to make. By the stars! Pyro stumbled away, and Darius managed to force himself upright as he started running. He stumbled, half tripping, and didn't quite make it to the window before the transformation began. Wings burst from his back, scales covered his skin, and his clothes were shredded right off of him. He launched himself out of the shattered window half a second before his body exploded in size and an enormous dragon burst from the confines of his flesh. Darius released a powerful roar filled with absolute rage as he swept up into the sky, and a sliver of fear traced along my spine. If he ever found out that I'd been responsible for this, he'd kill me. Dragon fire tore through the stormy clouds, and a deathly silence fell over the students as everyone strained to get a look at him where he flew away. More than a few people had been recording the whole thing on their atlases, and I was looking forward to watching the replay of my victory multiple times. Show's over, people, Pyro shouted as she ushered away the rest of us. Return to your rooms. That's minus 50 points to Ignis for an out-of-control blaze, Principal Nova called after Darius, though he clearly couldn't hear her over all the crazy roaring and fire breathing. And minus 20 for a student failing to control their order form. I had to bite my lip to stop myself from laughing at that one. Darius Acrux had just completely lost his shit in front of everyone because of what I'd done. And he had no idea that it was me. The principal noticed me before I could escape, and she beckoned me over. I heard about the incidents last night, Nova said softly. I'm glad to see you are up and about. Oh, thanks, I said, surprised to hear the concern in her voice. She reached out to squeeze my arm reassuringly. Minus 150 points for Ignis and Air for the two of you being missing at the assembly, though, she said before releasing me and walking away. My lips parted in surprise at the punishment. It wasn't like I gave a shit about house points, but that was cold. Maybe she wasn't so sympathetic after all. I turned away quickly and followed the crowd downstairs. When we made it to my floor, I peeled off and retreated to the safety of my bedroom. I pressed my back to the door, and a shiver of adrenaline rocked through me. Setting Darius's room on fire might have been a terrible idea, but damn, it had felt really fucking good. The next morning, I showered in my ensuite with a small smile on my lips that just wouldn't quit. While the hot water ran over my skin, I tried to make myself regret what I'd done, from a self preservation point of view at the very least. But I was struggling to do it. It might have been reckless and impulsive, but it was also pretty damn poetic. And it was the only way that I could strike back at Darius while I was still learning to take full control of my power. I was absolutely done with just scrolling over and taking shit from the heirs. What they'd done to me and Darcy on the night of the party was beyond forgivable. If they'd wanted to make enemies of us, then they had thoroughly succeeded. Now we needed to find ways to strike back at the rest of them. I shut the water off reluctantly and headed back into my room, running a towel through my hair. I left most of Darius's treasures hidden in Darcy's room for now, but a stack of 8 fat coins sat in a tower on my desk where I'd left them last night. I took a golden coin from the top of the pile and twisted it through my fingers. Looking at it made me feel stupidly happy, like we'd won a point against them for once. And they didn't even realize it. I inspected the coin for a few moments. A dragon was engraved on one side of it and a crown on the other. I pressed my thumb down on the dragon's face, drawing a little bit of heat to the surface of my skin until my thumbprint blurred the features of the snarling beast. I withdrew my thumb, smirking at the improvement to the coin before putting it down again so that I could get dressed. I pulled on a pair of black jeans and a black tank top and did my eyeliner thicker than I usually would during the day. Today, I seriously needed to channel the inner badass chick who stole super bikes in her spare time and didn't take shit from the assholes at Joey's bar. My atlas pinged persistently from my nightstand, and I sighed as I headed over to retrieve it. As I snatched it, my fingers brushed up against the dagger I'd stolen from Darius, and that funny sensation seemed to start up again. Like its presence was responding to me, urging me to take it. I grabbed it on an impulse and quickly took a seat at the foot of my bed as I opened my atlas. Your daily horoscope is waiting for you, Tori. I pursed my lips as I tapped on my horoscope, not really wanting to read it yet. Another warning about watching my back today, but Darcy was adamant that paying attention to these predictions could help us avoid the bullies at this school. So I would at least give it a read. Good morning, Gemini. The stars have spoken about your day. A shift in the alignment of your stars may have just had a positive effect on your day. But beware of trusting in change too easily. If you want this to be a permanent situation, then it will take hard work and dedication to your cause. You could find yourself on a collision course with a Taurus today, but if you can keep a level head, the interaction may be better than expected. I drummed my fingers against my thigh as I considered the words for a moment. I sure as hell wanted to think that our stars were about to change, but the whole thing was so vague that I could hardly rely on it. The only Taurus I could think of off the top of my head was Caleb Altair, and I had zero intentions of having any kind of interaction with him if I could avoid it. So keeping a level head probably wouldn't be an issue. I dismissed the horoscope and decided to check on the Faybook homepage. It wasn't like I enjoyed seeing embarrassing stories or comments about me and Darcy, but if I didn't know what was out there, then I wouldn't be prepared to face it. I bit my lip as I spotted all of the stories filling the newsfeed and couldn't help the breath of laughter that escaped me as a picture of Darius's livid face greeted me with a caption and plenty of comments. Milton Hubert. What a cruel world. The fire heir's room was burnt to a crisp while we were all out of the house. Where will he sleep now? Hashtag any offers, ladies? Hashtag worst luck. Hashtag even his clothes? Marguerite Hellbore. Poor baby. You can always come and stay with me. Hashtag company for my snuggly.
D.
Tyler Corbin. Pretty sure he publicly dumped you, Muff Scruff. But way to go on looking desperate. Hashtag shame on this dame. Hashtag humped and dumped. Marguerite Helbor.
We're on a break, loser. Check your facts. Hashtag stars don't lie. Hashtag meant to be.
Tyler Corbin. I really hope that you have that chat with him in public again so that I can watch you get dumped twice. Hashtag bitches be crazy. Eloise Perot.
There's plenty of space in my bed, Darius. Hashtag room for a bygone.
Tilly Farbringer.
I'm in actual tears over this tragedy, lighting a candle for Darius's loss tonight. Hashtag your pain is my pain.
I opted to save myself from the need to vomit in my own mouth as I noticed the long line of sympathetic messages from half of the school and stopped to read, but my gaze was drawn back to that picture. Darius didn't look furious. He seemed genuinely upset, and I really hope that there had been some things in his room that he truly cared about. He deserved some bad luck, and I wasn't at the least bit against the idea of giving him some. I scrolled on, but all I found was a post after post dedicated to Darius and his bedroom disaster. The post about what the heirs had done to me and Darcy had been buried by all the new school drama, and I was more than a little smug to realize we were yesterday's news already. I grinned at a short video clip which showed the flames bursting from the roof of Ignis' house, and for a moment, it felt like the pain of the heirs had caused us had been banished. A loud knock came at the door, and I flinched, almost dropping my atlas in surprise. I cursed myself for being afraid, but it wasn't that surprising. A couple of nights ago, I'd almost drowned, and now I was an arsonist? I half considered pretending I wasn't here, but that felt a little like cowering in my room, so I stood and moved towards the door instead. I quickly scooped Darius's gold coins into my satchel and tossed it to the floor on my way to the door. My fingers closed around the handle. I fixed a bored expression onto my face and I tugged the door open. At the last second, I realized I hadn't hidden Darius's dagger and my heart leapt in panic, but it was too late to do anything about it. Caleb Altair stood, leaning against my doorframe, with a half smile on his handsome face and a hand midway through messing up his blonde curls. So much for avoiding him today. Hey, sweetheart, he said, as I full on glared at him. I didn't bother to wait for another word to pass his lips before slamming the door in his face. He jammed his foot in the doorway to stop it from closing, and I stalked away from him as the door bounced back open. My gaze snagged on the dagger lying on my bed, so I plopped down on it like I didn't have a care in the world, and one of the most vindictive men I've ever met hadn't just intruded on my personal space. "Can I come in?" Caleb asked, his voice softer than I would have expected. He hadn't set foot in the room yet, and I couldn't help the surprise that flickered over my face. "Well, we both know I can't stop you if that's what you decided to do," I said coldly. "Which is why I'm offering you the choice," he replied. "I just want to talk. I swear I won't lay a finger on you. I'm not even going to bite you. I'd just like you to hear me out." "Why?" I demanded, narrowing my eyes suspiciously. "In private, please, sweetheart. I'm drawing a bit of a crowd out here already." I glanced over his shoulder and noticed a few of the other fire elemental students lurking beyond him like he'd said. I guessed the Terror House captain didn't come to Ignis' house all that often, but he held the element of fire so he could get in easily enough. And it was probably more intriguing to see him calling on me. My magic built in my chest as I prepared to defend myself from him if necessary. But he didn't make any move towards me. He genuinely seemed to want my permission to come in. And despite myself, I was curious to hear what he had to say. "Fine," I said eventually, beckoning him in. I scooted myself upright and pressed my back to the wall beside my bed, keeping my ass on the dagger. My pulse spiked as Caleb stepped inside, and his lips twitched as if he heard it, which he probably had. Damn vampire asshole. The door clicked shut, and Caleb flicked a hand through the air. A wave of warmth slid over my skin, and the hairs on the back of my neck prickled to attention. Silencing bubble, he explained, as he noticed my confused expression. Just to keep our conversation private. I nodded vaguely, trying not to think about the fact that that also meant no one would be able to hear me scream. Caleb moved towards me like he was going to come and sit beside me on the bed, and I pointed to the chair by my desk instead. No way did I want him that close to me again. He perched on the seat and ran his hands over his jaw as he surveyed me with his navy eyes. "What do you want?" I demanded when he didn't seem inclined to enlighten me. "It just occurred to me that you probably don't know much about the vampire code," he said slowly. "The what?" "Well, the different orders of Fae all have their own governing body to guide the actions of their members while under the influence of their order form. With so many different behaviors, natures, instincts, and ability to juggle, it's much easier just to maintain control by having individual factions. And as my source, I thought it was right that you know a bit about Caleb," I asked, interrupting him. "If you're not here to bite me, then maybe you just want to piss off? Because unless your latest form of torture is trying to bore me to death, I've got absolutely nothing to say to you. I don't know if you've forgotten, but if your twisted bunch of friends almost got me killed the night before last, so I have less than zero interest in spending my time in your company." Caleb met the hatred in my gaze with a flicker of a smile. "Well, I'm glad they didn't crush your spirit after all, sweetheart." I bristled at the fact that he hadn't so much as flinched at my words. I didn't miss the fact that he'd said they as if he had no part in what had happened to me, which was absolute bullshit because I'd seen him standing right there beside him as a part of their group through and through. Caleb continued to watch me with interest as I fought against the desire to start screaming at him. What the hell was with this guy? He just barged into my personal space, started talking about some organization of an order I wanted nothing to do with. "If you won't leave, then I will," I said firmly. I shoved myself off of the bed, flipping the duvet over as I rose to conceal the stolen dagger. I made it to the door, but Caleb shot towards me in a blur of motion, pressing his hand into beside my head and leaning in close. I was pinned in by the masculine scent of him and the hard lines of his muscular body. My only choice was to meet his gaze as he trapped me in it. "I just wanted you to know that I had nothing to do with what happened at the pool," he breathed. "I knew the others were planning something, but I had no idea it would be so—" I frowned up at him, wondering what the hell he wanted me to say to that. "If you just left with me when I asked you to," he sighed, "then we could have enjoyed a very different kind of evening." "Oh, so it's my fault because I didn't want to leave with you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow at him. "No, but I did try to get you out of there. That's got to count for something." "You tried to get me out of there so that you could get into my pants, which isn't heroic in any way. Did you make any attempt to get Darcy away from Seth before he attacked her and hacked her hair off?" I growled. "Well, no, but she isn't my source. I have a duty to protect you from harm, and I've sworn an oath, which means I can't torture or torment you," Caleb said. "Oh, how noble. I can't say I've ever felt particularly protected in the pool, though. I was half dead when Orion dragged me out of there." "They wouldn't have killed you," he said, though his voice held a note of hesitation, which made me think that he wasn't entirely sure about that. "Is that it, then? Have you finished your half-assed attempt at an apology? Because I've got somewhere to be," I snapped. "I'm not apologizing," he said. "I'm just telling you it wasn't me. You don't need to be afraid of me doing anything like that to you. As my source, you can be sure of that." "Well, don't go into any special lengths on my account. I don't want to be your source. And if that's the only reason you have for not being a psychopath, then it's nothing to be proud of. So why don't you just relieve me of your so-called bond, and then you could have free reign to be as much of an asshole as the rest of your little friends. And I won't have to endure the feeling of your mouth on my skin again." I glared at him, as he kept me pinned against the wall, refusing to back down. Magic tingled as it raced along my arms and pooled in the palms of my hands, ready to be unleashed. Caleb held my gaze for several long seconds, then sighed as he took his hand from the door and stepped back. I didn't come here to argue with you, Tori. I want you to know that what happened the other night didn't make me feel good about anything. They have a claim to their power and a fight for their position, but you're supposed to do it one on one. The way they ganged up on you, you broke through the ice while it was just Max controlling it. It took Darius's power combined with his to trap you beneath it. Well, you already knew I was stronger than all of you. It's our lack of training that puts us at a disadvantage. It might be worth reminding your little friends of that, because just as soon as I get a lock on how to use my magic against the four of you, I'll be doing it. And I hear payback's a real bitch. Instead of recoiling from that statement, or getting angry about it, Caleb's mouth hooked into a smirk. I look forward to it. He took a step towards the door, but I shifted in front of it to stop him from leaving. Just tell me why, I ground out. Why can't you accept us saying that we don't want the throne? You say that now, but once you're trained and once your order emerges, you don't know how your minds could change. How you might embrace your fey nature and long for power like everyone else in the world. We can't take that risk. He smiled ruefully, like that was just the way it was. And I guess for him, it was the truth. Why can't we just stay here, learn to use our magic, and gain our inheritance without having to do anything with us ruling over a kingdom we know nothing about? I pressed, refusing to give up my point. Because that's not how Fae are. We're born with our magic, but we have to work to harness it and wield it better than others. I might have been born an heir to the Celestial Council, but that doesn't automatically mean I get to sit in my mother's seat when she retires. I have a younger brother and a sister who are heirs too, and I'll have to prove that I'm stronger than them to take my place. I'll have to fight off any outside challenges that come at me. I might even have to fight my mother for her place on the council if she doesn't release it willingly. The royal family and celestial heirs may be the most powerful in Solaria, but it doesn't give us automatic right to rule. Even here at the school, we're being watched, assessed. We're constantly flexing our magical muscles against other students and make sure that they remember exactly who we are and what we're capable of. That sounds exhausting, I muttered. It is, but it's also necessary for the people to have faith in the rulers. They need to see that we can hold our power without question. Unfortunately for you and your sister, that also means we're either expected to keep you in check or bow to you. You were born with more magic than us. Not to mention the fact that you've been awakened with all four elements. There are countless of press articles being published every day calling for the Vegas to take back their throne. We have to ensure that everyone can see we're stronger than you if we don't want to let you have it. So what we want has nothing to do with it, I asked. And what about the fact that everyone called our father the Savage King? Surely no one would want his heirs taking over his reign if he was so awful. People are fickle. There will always be some things to complain about when it comes to rulers, and there are plenty of reasons for them to dislike the Celestial Council, even if it's immeasurably better than living under a tyrant. And you're not your father. Many will wonder what changes the two of you might make to our kingdom. Plus, they believe that if you're strong enough to claim the throne, then it should be yours, regardless. That's really stupid, I said. Power doesn't equal good leadership skills. Beating people into submission seems like a terrible way to choose your ruler. You could end up with a group of vindictive assholes for ruler who try to drown people to get in their way. Caleb smirked at me. Well, if you ever want to take up your throne, maybe you can try to shake things up the way they are done. I don't rate your chances though, sweetheart. This is the way the Fae are, and that look in your eye says you're just the same as the rest of us. I'm nothing like you, I protested angrily. No? So you haven't daydreamed about giving us a taste of our own medicine? You aren't tempted to use your power to blow me across the room every time I bite you against your will? He smiled knowingly, and I shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't have to think about doing any of that if you'd all just leave us alone, I protested. That's never going to happen, Caleb said with a shrug. So, what you have to decide is what you're going to do about it. He stepped towards the door again, and this time I let him leave. I stood in my doorway and watched Caleb as he walked down the corridor. Other students scurried out of his path as he passed them, and more than one nodded or even bowed their heads to him in deference. And it wasn't just the fear that made them act that way, it was respect. What I thought of the heirs and their asshole ways, it was clear that the rest of the Fae didn't see it the same way. And although I had no intention of becoming like them, maybe it was time I accepted the fact that Fae did things differently. If we were going to survive here, then we needed to adapt. And I was ready to do just that.